the guys from Ping, they've kind of shown me how much the equipment matters.
I just love that I can hit any shot I kind of want.
We're going to be able to tell some fun stories about what goes on here to help golfers play better golf.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ping Proving Grounds podcast. I'm Shane Bacon, joined as always by Marty Jertson. Marty, we've got someone that I think has like level IQ to you on the podcast today. Is that fair to say? Are we okay saying that, Marty?
Nico and I have had some fun conversations, Shane. This is going to be a fun one, brother.
Yeah, I mean, it's a company I'm very interested in. I've heard about it over the years. Nico Darras is with us from Golf Blueprint, and Nico, first and foremost, I think for people that don't know what Golf Blueprint is, can you just kind of explain it like you're explaining it to somebody at a holiday party? Like, what do you do, and you tell them what you do?
So whenever that happes, I always say to him, "How long do you have?" First and foremost, because that's really the kicker.
This is the internet, baby. You can go as long as you want.
Of course. So the 30,000 foot super quick one is Golf Blueprint is a data and analytics company. I started with a friend named Dr. Kevin Moore, and originally I started out as his student. Kind of a funny story about how we met through a podcast. Andy's, I know he's a friend of all of ours on the Fried Egg, and started off as a student. I was a first semester doctoral student in education, and basically shot him a cold email, said, "Hey man, I'm new to golf. I'd been playing 2 years at that point. I'm playing the mini tours and I need help because I'm tired of getting absolutely waxed in Arizona." Needless to say, shooting 72 on the Outlaw Tour wasn't getting it done.
No.
And so Kev and I started GB together. We have clients all around the world. We work with everything from, typically like the highest range is like 20-ish handicap. That's what we like to say, all the way down to the best players in the world. And we design practice plans. That's our main bread and butter. So taking what someone does well, whether it's through a questionnaire, obviously the tour guys are completely different with super hands-on, but for the average member, they fill out a questionnaire. And then from that questionnaire, we try to deduce down essentially areas of the game that they can improve in. Super high yield stuff that if you're a dad, if you're a mom, you have an hour a week, 2 hours a week, you can try to get better, and more importantly, have a little fun.
Nico, I think that's such an important problem to be solved. I think every golfer is faced with this dilemma where you have 20 minutes before you go play to practice. Maybe you're like getting into it. You're a scratch golfer at your club, and you're putting in 3 to 4 good hours a week. It's like, what do you do with that time? Right. So that's basically what Golf Blueprint is doing, is trying to maximize, like you said, the yield, or like, how do you structure your time, which I think a lot of golfers are, even the best players in the world, which I'd love to get some stories about that from you, are struggle with that problem. Right.
Totally. So one thing I think that we all understand in working around and being with tour guys is they're just regular people who happen to be freaks at hitting golf balls. They struggle with the same things, right? They have wives, they have kids. And as much as everyone has read the story of, the most famous golfer in the world waking up at 4 a.m. and running 13 miles and then doing an obstacle course and hitting balls for 6 hours, probably not the reality for most guys. They want to get up, they want to, get their workout in, and they want to be home, right? They want to be able to enjoy their lives the same as the country club scratch, who's trying to get a little better. And more importantly to us, that, 10 to 14 handicapper that just like dreams of playing in their club championship.
Yeah.
How do they get better? And I think one of the big things for us is understanding, nerding out here, chaos theory, where, there's a huge, like, wide swath of golfers that all play the game at different levels. But we really tried to figure out what makes them more similar and what can we then do to help those players. Because there might be a million reasons you're a 10 handicap, but we can pretty much deduce you're not a good driver of the ball as a 10 handicap. And so once we were able to just make those like huge hypothesis, guess, and then build a plan and try, it was essentially trial and error in the beginning, to now we feel relatively confident. I would say, obviously, like, this is me being an academic where, like, I will never tell you I'm super confident in something just because there's 200 people out there who are way smarter and better at what they do. But we feel pretty confident that, like you said, Marty, those super high yield things, right? I listened to your podcast with Andrew Rice, like working on your driver at the driving range. Everyone makes fun of that. You should be working on your driver at the driving range.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely hammer that thing.
If you have
man.
the distance, that's the big Northeast issue. I mean, living in the Northeast, it's like, where can I go bang drivers? I got to go out on my golf course. But Nico, I want to go back to kind of the start of this, because I'm very interested in anybody that finds a solution for a problem. I mean, Marty and I've talked about Stack over the years, obviously. I mean, you think about the introduction of the ping company. I mean, it was literally, there were issues and problems, and Mr. Solheim came up with solutions for those issues. Did you look around and say, there's nothing like this? Were you looking online trying to find maybe some sort of if I have an hour and a half each week to go out and practice, what should I do? Because I do find being an adult is extremely intimidating in terms of getting into something new. People want to go work out. Where do you start? How do you do it? How do I break up my time between leg day and arm day? What do those days even mean, right? And I even think for good players at times, hey, I got to go to the range and work on something. But what the hell am I doing at the driving range in terms of my 45 minutes? So did you dig online initially to see what was out there in this space and basically come back with no results?
So as a mega dork, of course, that is my job, is research. And I scoured the internet and read as much as I could. And I came across nothing really that stuck. And that was a huge issue. I come from team sports. So I came from a baseball background, played a little in school, and I didn't have to show up to baseball practice and create my own plan.
Totally.
All I had to do was show up and execute. So then when I was trying to get better at golf, I did what everyone does. And I watched Tiger play Torrey Pines in 2000 and, just obliterate everybody. And it, for some reason, wasn't helping me shoot lower scores, much to my chagrin. But then I was like, okay, how do I structure my time? Because when I was in school, my time was so variable. Some days I'd have an hour. Some days I'd have none. Some days I'd have 3 hours. And I wasn't getting better fast enough. So I had to close the gap between where I was and where I wanted to be. And I didn't have time to say, okay, well, I have 10 years to do this. Well, I wanted to get better in 2 weeks, not 10 years. And so I had to essentially, like you said, solve the problem of time. How do I structure my practice so that when I go home, I can say, look, I actually did something. I got better, versus I think all of us have done this. We show up and we're like, what am I going to work on today? And then you hit a squirrely 7-iron and then 45 minutes goes by and you've just hit nothing but 7-irons for 45 minutes. And then you have to go home. And some days that's really, that's effective practice, right? I'm never going to say there's no such thing as bad practice, but being able to go home and say, look, I accomplished something. I'm working towards a larger goal. And the biggest thing in my end is not being reactive to, like I said, that last shot or that last game or that last tournament that you played in. All of us have played tournament golf where some days you go out there and you flush it. Other days you show up and, you chip terribly. Well, that might just be an anomaly, or maybe you are a horrific chipper and you should spend a little bit more time working on it.
Do you iron those things out, Nico, within Golf Blueprint? I mean, like, let's say Marty was struggling with pitching the golf ball, or I was struggling with putting. Can you input those types of things within the system, and it will give you more time to focus on the things you struggle on? Is that part of kind of the AI side of it or whatever?
Yeah, so we absolutely let golfers tell us what they need. At the end, I mean, we've been through every iteration of like AI, machine learning about, what do we think the player needs? And then finally we sat down and we're like, why don't we just let the player tell us what they want to work on? Like this, again, sometimes we solve problems that we don't have. We're like, oh my goodness, why didn't we just like start at square one? The tour is a little bit different. And I will always clarify, like, the amateur golfer and the tour golfer are not playing the same sport, as the three of us understand.
No.
So with the tour guys, it's my job to kind of push and pull and say, yeah, I know you think you're about iron player. Actually not right now. Let's spend a little bit more time on wedges and let's continue working that. Because those guys tend to be hyper reactive, and ladies, I love my LPGA girls as well, where they tend to be a little bit more reactive to what just happened versus my 6, 12, and 18-month goals.
Yeah, Nico, I find myself falling victim to that, like recency bias, man. Play that one tournament, putted bad the last round or the last 3 holes. I'm like, I got to change, I got to revolutionize my
man.
putting.
I'm the worst putter on the planet. What am I doing? Hey, Marty, can I ask you a question? I want to ask you about, like, how do you go about, as somebody that's competitive and has played this game for so long, how do you go about your practice? And I'm assuming it has changed over the years. I know you're one that's always kind of focused on how do you maximize every kind of minute you have in your life across the board. How has your practice evolved, changed, and how do you go about an hour on the range if you have that time on a Tuesday?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a never-ending journey, Shane. So it's not like I have like the magic or the secret formula for this, but I try to be very smart about practicing the most impactful parts of the game for whatever tournament or event that I have coming up.
Okay.
So like it's pretty you know what course you have coming up. Nico, I'm gonna love getting into some stuff with you on preparing some tour players for some very specific courses. But I got a specific course, specific tournament coming up. I play some tournaments, Shane, in Arizona, where the driver's not that important. I'm going to be hitting my Thriver, my 3-wood. It's going to be all about wedges from 90 to 130. I'll put a lot of time in there. I'll measure it, launch monitor, and put a lot of focus to that. I always do like very simple maintenance on my putting. So like alignment, aim, start line. I call that kind of maintenance. It's more the boring block practice. You see all the tour players doing it, and then cycle it with plenty of like meaningful intent, like randomized practice that has some results. I put some pressure on myself, and I love playing like 9 holes. Like I'm the king of 9 holes after work. Sometimes I'll play like a worst ball thing out there format. When I was getting ready for some of the majors at my home course, Wildfire, Shane, I would tee off. I would go to where my tee shot went, literally drive 100 yards back, drop my ball, and hit my second shot in from there. And that was a pretty good representation of like Bethpage and Wingfoot.
I was going to say that's like Bethpage Black 2.0. Yeah. That's right.
You got to get a little creative. I mean, that's the only way you can hit the 5-iron in there here in some of the Arizona golf.
That's really, really smart. I mean, I think, Nico, to Marty's point is we've been 20, we've been 25, we've been 30, right? And we just continue to go about our business. And, Marty, something I've tried to change personally is not sitting on the range, hitting more than 10 shots with one club, right? So if I'm hitting 10 8-irons, that's the max number I'm going to hit with a single club. And then I'm going to move on. Nico, when you've done a deep dive into this type of stuff, is there a number you put on the maximum amount of golf shots you should be hitting with a single club or single shot? Do you do any of that where it's like, this is enough of that club, let's move on?
So 2 things. Marty, number 1, slam dunk. Like, love all of that. And I also really want to highlight both of what you said about getting out on the golf course, because this answers your question, Shane. We only get 1 shot. Well, I mean, theoretically, you could pump a bunch of balls OB off the tee. You can get as many tries as you want. Believe me, I've been there. But on the course, you're only really getting 1 shot at it. And so, yes, the idea of random practice where you're just theoretically constantly cycling through, it's not really realistic. So I don't necessarily have a number so much as for my like true tour sickos, I basically work them into 2 categories. It's either an outcome. So you need to hit 10 7-irons at this target that start 2 yards left and they fade into the window. Or for like my mega sickos, I make them stop at a certain amount of time. So I might give them 8 minutes or 10 minutes to complete a task, because otherwise, one of my players in particular, who happened to be world number 1, will stand there until his hands bleed, and he will not do anything else until he's accomplished that goal. And when you realize why he's world number 1, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But in terms of, again, we keep going to that like high yield practice, we need them to move on from that task. That makes them amazing at what they do, but I still need you to go hit your freaking 3-wood for 10 minutes, man. Like, we're going to have to hit that, like Marty said, a bunch of times at our next event. Let's make sure we're staying on task.
Nico, I think one of the big aha moments for me, I remember this like yesterday. It was at the PGA Championship. I'm on the putting green, and I'm doing my kind of mindless practice. I'm hitting my straight in 4-footers, and then I'm doing some lag putts. And I remember Jordan Spieth was there, and Cameron McCormick was guiding his practice, and he had his watch out on his phone. He had the timer going, and I heard him saying to Jordan, okay, we got 8 minutes left, and he's walking off and telling him what putts to hit. And they're counting everything. They're codifying everything. And he was like, okay, he's got 8 minutes left to box in his practice. And I was like, man, no wonder these guys are different, but not everyone is like that, because I've had friends on tour that show up at the putting green and they're like, oh, everyone's banging in straight putts. Let me go do that. That must be what I need to do. And they're kind of lost as well. So even some of the tour players are kind of probably, kind of confused on what is the best way to spend that time, especially on the putting green, right?
Totally. Tour pros, like we said, they're normal human beings too, right? I wouldn't have a job if everyone was able to structure their own practice and be able to manage their time effectively. And I think one of the biggest things that Cameron, Cameron's a friend and does great work with Jordan, is that being able to just allow that player's brain to turn off, that they don't have to plan something. All they're doing is executing, especially tournament week. your only job is to put the ball in the hole. Have other people take care of all the distractions and get rid of all of the side things so that you just have a clear green light to executing. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go play. How relaxing would that be versus, the three of us, we're our own caddy and then we're doing this. And, I'm probably filming an Instagram video and thinking about whatever else I'm having for dinner that night. And then it's no wonder I go shoot 76, right? It's a little bit of a different strategy.
Marty, I ran into that at the Amateur last year. I remember that I've played in tournaments and I've had, I don't travel much for golf anymore, like for golf tournament golf, right? I mean, I just don't, I'm not going to go travel much. I'm going to go maybe play 2 tournaments a year on the road. And I found myself, to your point, Nico, kind of looking around. I was looking around at other people, what they were doing. And then I'd go back to the hotel thinking, should I be back at the range? Exactly. And I might go back to the range, but Nico, I think this is where Golf Blueprint started in theory, is even if I go back to the range, I have no plan. I'm going to go hit some shots and there's likelihood I might find something bad in the golf swing versus finding answers that I don't even know what I'm looking for. When you guys, first I wanted to ask, when was the aha moment with the tour player? Like, when did you have the first person that reached out to you guys and you were like, oh my goodness, this is somebody that matters? And when the steady stream started to come from the big time players and from people that mattered, how stressful was that to lay out plans for these people that are at a level of golf most people don't understand?
So I can tell you two funny stories without names. So the first tour pro, like kind of big name we got in, he called us, we Zoomed him. He was in the drive-through with his wife. And we're like, what is going on? Like, just the most classic, like, chaotic dude who just is the biggest free soul and the greatest human on the planet. And we're like, what do you do for practice? He's like, God is my witness. He goes, well, I get there and I start with a 5-iron. And, if I hit a couple good ones, I go play. And I'm like I have this like whole stats presentation. I have everything. I'm like pouring over the data. And I was like, hey man, you actually happen to be number 1 last year on tour from like 175 to 200. So you probably hit it pretty good most days with a 5-iron, right? He goes, well, yeah. I go, so you don't practice then, right? He goes, well, not really. We just cracked up and we're like, okay, like totally took the veil of like, oh my gosh, it's the tour into just, all right, these are regular dudes who are really good at their job. And the second piece is that first kind of big aha moment of this actually works. I always laugh. Everyone I've ever worked with is better than me at the game of golf. So everybody that I've worked with, I'm terrified, of course, that, hopefully this works. Hopefully it will. Hopefully it won't. And that's just confidence now in having done it for a couple of years where you're like, hey, you know what? I think this first plan is going to be a good guess. And I think that some of these games are going to work for you. But more importantly, the ones that don't, you need to tell me why. Because on my end, look, we have the greatest hits. We made a t-shirt. It was hilarious. It's Golf Blueprint's greatest hits with all of our games. And there's a really good chance that death taxes in the 9-iron will clean up your short game. But for some players, it might be a disaster. And we need to know why. And that kind of combo of having the confidence to send something and say, I believe this is going to work, but also the mental elasticity to hear, hey man, this one sucked and here's why. And not have the ego to judge that player, but just to listen, say, all right, man, hey, tell me about why, you didn't like it. Well, maybe they're working on a draw pattern with their coach and we gave them hit 3 fades and they just don't want to do it. Totally okay by me.
Nico, do you work with a lot of college teams, high school teams? I mean, this sounds like perfect for, if I'm on a golf team, you show up to practice or your schedule's a little bit different with labs or things of that nature. How much work do you guys do with juniors or colleges, high schools?
So I'll separate juniors and colleges out a little bit. I do not work with juniors, and I'm very clear about that because I'm really afraid that if I'm not there, Golf Blueprint in the wrong hands is a disaster. Because for a parent who takes this to the extreme, they're going to blow past my 10-minute, time meter. And that kid, I don't want a kid to be stuck there doing a drill for 3 hours when it's only meant to be 10 minutes.
Gotcha.
So Kevin and I made a decision very early on that, hey, listen, we're not going to do juniors. If a parent buys it for their kid, obviously great. We hope that they follow the directions. The last thing I want is for someone in 10 years to play on tour and be like, dude, you made me do those drills forever. I'm like, no, like this was like, dude, it was the opposite. But yeah, we have some great relationships with college teams. Those are grown men and grown women who are able to hopefully manage their time. And that's more of a consulting thing that we do for fun, not necessarily a part of the business, just more as, we've made some great inroads with college coaches.
Nico, you mentioned the Hits shirt, and I don't want you to get too deep in the weeds because obviously you want people to go out and subscribe and buy Golf Blueprint. But can you just maybe lay out a couple of the most popular programs you guys give to players, what that might look like to not a professional player, but maybe a single-digit handicap or somebody that's a 12, 13 handicap trying to improve?
Totally. And I will also preface this by saying I'm not a great businessman and that I give everything away on my Instagram. So if you're following
it's not
this,
private. You can follow it.
It's not private. You've probably seen enough golf blueprints or my daily posts to just watch what I'm doing. So I always clarify that to people that if money's an issue, shoot us an email. We'd love to help you. Like, we didn't get into the golf business to make money. This was Kev had another job. I had another job. We did it because we loved it. And we also then created a business out of it. So I always clarify that piece. But the most important games that I've found at the tour level are wedge play. Because especially for super high speed guys, they have a hard time dumping that speed. I know Marty and I've talked a lot about ball speed. And everyone wants to drive the Ferrari down the Autobahn at 200. Nobody wants to drive it in a school zone at 35. Where there's massive consequences, and that's wedge play. So the tours wedge play, we talk a lot about that. The amateurs, we find a ton of gains in short game and driving. Those, obviously, approach play is huge, wedges are huge, putting's huge, but getting someone to be able to drive the ball accurately enough is the key word as an amateur, and then be able to just kind of clean up the short game. Not good, not great. So, for example, a driving game for those people at home. You pick 2 targets out in the air, roughly 60 yards, and hit 10 balls, see how many you hit and play. I mean, these are the most basic ground level things you can do. When you're chipping, hit 3 balls, how many of them were within 6 feet, 50-50. So these are all the kind of things that you can do at home without ever subscribing to Golf Blueprint that I hope someone would take away from social media or a podcast like this.
And Nico, those are great. They don't require a launch monitor, any measurement stuff. I mean, you can go to any range, any chipping green, do these things, right?
Absolutely. And a launch monitor is a huge barrier to entry. I'm fortunate to work with a launch monitor company. I know how expensive they are. I know how expensive all these things are. And more importantly, how expensive are range balls. I went to a public course the other day in South Florida and paid $20 for 70 balls. Of those 70 balls, probably 10 of them were rocks.
Yeah.
The other 20 of them didn't fly straight. And so you sit there and you say to people like, well, how can I get better? You need to be able to maximize your time. And I always say this, chipping and putting's free. You can show up to a place, chip and putt, and you can get really good at that for no cost.
My kids and I would just watch the Full Swing episode with Tony Finau, and they went to his house in Utah. And his dad's like, they went to see his garage, had all the dings in it. And he would hit balls all week. Couldn't afford range balls. To be like, hey, every Sunday we go chip and putt. It was free.
Love it. Love that. Because it's a huge barrier to entry, unfortunately, for people.
Yeah.
There's things that are changing that with e-golf and sim golf and whatnot. But as it stands right now, driving range balls can be expensive at a public place.
And not getting cheaper. I mean, I find, Marty, it's so interesting. And I mean, obviously, you live in Phoenix. I was talking to my uncle a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about the driving range and how it feels like the range that we knew, Marty, that's a range with grass that has a lot of targets, maybe has green targets that they mow down. It feels like that's kind of dying a bit. I mean, a lot of this is going the technological route where, it's kind of got, top tracer, things like that, which are great and very fun. But for a golfer that's trying to find answers in the dirt, they're not always the best places to go. I think about Dobson Ranch, Marty, all the time. I mean, you think about the old Dobson Ranch range. It was awesome. You get the jumbo bucket. It was like $11. You go out there and hit it a whole bunch of targets. And now it's rather expensive to go there. And most of the time you're hitting off mats. So, Nico, I think your point about, the short game is where you can save the most strokes on the planet. We all know that. But if you can go out there and spend half an hour, to your point, you're somebody that has a job and they have children and they don't have all the time in the world, but they subscribe to Golf Blueprint, and you give them a lesson plan for half an hour a week on the short game, you can go do that basically anywhere. Even if the greens aren't great, you can go out there and actually work on certain things and see how the results come about.
Totally.
Nico, I'm going to ask you a selfish question here. What type of protocol or practice or gamification would you do for a player who gets really nervous on the first tee? Because I know you've done some research with breath work, heart rate variability, how to calm your nervous system or ramp it up on purpose in practice, right? Tell us a little bit about your work in that space and maybe some tips, tricks, or ideas for folks out there that might get a little shaky on that first tee shot.
Oh boy, let me tell you, my hands chatter every day. Doesn't matter. Especially over that first 3 foot little slider. Maybe it's inside. Oh boy. So it all started for me a couple years ago with one of my tour players, and they were wearing a Whoop band. I have a partnership with them, so free ads on that behalf. I will always clarify. And I was watching his heart rate over a 6-footer with a chance to tie, and this putt would have changed his life. He had a chance to tie. He didn't have a lot of status, and he didn't sniff the cup. And I looked back, and it was 146 over that 6-foot putt. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. There's something here. And in Phoenix, one of my closest friends was Special Forces. And I was telling him this story, and he was like, dude, we used to do heart rate work all the time. And it just kicked off this basically year-long deep dive of researching every single thing that I possibly could on the correlation between heart rate and performance. And where does the basic XY axis, for those of you who aren't listening, my fingers are in an XY axis of, okay, we know that we can't perform at 60 heart. Your heart rate at 60 is not going to perform. You're not in competition. You're probably sitting on your couch. But we also know that at 150, you start to lose control of your fingertips. They go a little bit numb. Things start to change. Your decision-making starts to cloud. And so it was essentially trying to figure out through just massive trial and error of doing it on myself, jamming my heart rate up with burpees, listening to metal music at full blast, and just really uncomfortable hours and hours and hours on the range of figuring out not only where do I play, but then what can I replicate for other players so that they can try their best, because it's never going to be the same, right? But I always use the analogy. We take a 17, 18-year-old kid off the street, and 2 years later, they become a functioning Navy SEAL. Why is it that we don't believe that in golf, you can go from having never played to being able to perform? You can train someone to perform. Essentially, I always say by keeping your finger over the flame, you'll start to go numb. And for me, every single person that I play with is better than me at golf every single day. They're all tour pros. That's who I play with. And I got tired of freaking out every day over those 3-footers. And I said to myself, yes, I want to get better mentally. I want to get better physically. But what's this kind of third missing piece that I don't quite understand? How come I freak out every single day? And finally, I just got to the point where I said, you know what? I can't change it. I'm going to accept it. Now I look at things as a bell curve. 10 to 20 days a year, I am flushing it. I slept 8 hours. I had a great breakfast. Everything went right. My favorite song was on the radio. 10 to 20 days a year, my arms feel like an octopus. I hit nothing but El Hosels. And oh, dear Lord, is it a disaster? Most days are somewhere in the middle. How do we manage that day to day in golf?
Marty, I wanted to ask, what's the most nervous you've ever been on the first tee? What's the most nervous first tee of your life?
It was 2011 PGA Championship first tee shot. And it's because I went into that event, Shane. The course was tough. Atlanta Athletic Club.
Yep.
Like there's some holes with water, some holes. The course is obviously very long and penalizing. I didn't sleep good the night before. I wasn't particularly hitting it good in my practice rounds.
Yep.
Obviously that could change, but I was like, I was a nervous wreck. And I get on that first tee, and it's not a driver hole. It's like you got to turn a 3-wood. I really wish I had my driver. I wish I would have my driver, but I didn't.
Nothing worse on the planet than you're nervous you haven't hit 3-wood. Oh gosh.
It was all day long. I kept thinking, how can I hit a driver on this hole? And it's just not a driver. And so that was the kicker. So I had to hit a 3-wood. I blocked it over in the right rough, hit it in the bunker, made a bogey. Oh man. But that was the most nervous I've been on the first tee.
Is the scariest shot in golf. Like you're on the first tee.
There's nothing worse.
I was talking to one of my tour guys who played in the Brookline Open, and same story for him. First major, getting up there, just shaking. And he said he hit a driver off the shaft. And I mean, he said he didn't get any of the club face. And he's like, dude, I think I hit this thing 236 yards. And everyone clapped. And I was like, goodness gracious, get me out of here. Like that's,
Marty, this is the Thriver. I mean, this is why the Thriver's the play, baby.
Exactly.
It's just like one of the best clubs ever. By the way, Marty, I don't know if you deal with this, but a few days ago, I was playing with a friend of mine, could not understand the Thriver thing. And then every time I hit the Thriver, he could never get which one was which. Did you hit the big Thriver there, or was that the Thriver? I just want to almost get like the Bubba pink one for my Thriver so people will like truly understand the difference. But I guarantee you, since we've started this podcast, Marty, I think I've personally sold 50 Thrivers, because once people understand the benefit of not having to hit 3-wood when you don't want to hit 3-wood off the tee. But dude, Marty, that makes me nervous thinking about it. It's like first tee shot, super nervy. Like playing the amateur last year, first hole was Colorado Golf Club, 650 par 5. It's like, listen, I get to swing as hard as I can at a driver. That's at least I know that. I know I can at least do this. Yes. And that's the good thing. Nico, I want to go back to tour players for just a moment, because you get a tour player that approaches you about Golf Blueprint. Then you see success with a tour player that's using Golf Blueprint. You don't have to name names, but like, what's the biggest compliment you've received from the highest level of player about what you've done for their mental game or physical game, or just the way they've gone about like off weeks or spending time on their game?
The biggest compliment ever was watching an interview, and someone asked a question about a really particular knee-high shot at a very famous golf club in Georgia that is played typically in April.
Okay, never heard of it.
Yeah, never heard of it. And the guy said, I've hit that shot before in practice for the last 2 months.
Interesting.
And getting to hear that was so freaking cool. And just be able to go, wow, dude, that translated. Like when a pro says, I've hit that shot, that's everything. Like that is so rewarding, because like Marty said, you plan out your weeks, and we all plan like, all right, I'm going to hit it here, I'm going to hit it there. Well, I'm not that good at executing. And so sometimes I do, but they often do. And so to be able to plan and then execute on your game plan is just so rewarding. Everyone who's played a round of golf where, you're looking where you're hitting it, God, what a good feeling. And how fun is the game when you're doing that?
I think about this a lot, Nico, that, I think day in and day out, if there wasn't that tournament in April in Augusta, I think your average tour player could go through the rest of the year hitting the balls straight, hitting a little cut. But that one tournament, there is, demands, and the tour players they literally have all winter to think about that. If that's their penultimate goal is to win the Masters, there are specific shots you need to pull off there, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you weave that in, like preparing one of the best players in the world, whether it's for that tournament or another one, weave in where they have to practice a certain shot but not overdo it? Like if I were practicing for Augusta, it's not like I'm going to hit draws all day long and change my whole pattern to being draws. You just need it a couple times, right? How do you weave that in?
So there's two ways to look at it. There's the way that you can structure practice so that, let's say 3 months out, 2 months out, a month out, a couple weeks out. That's a huge and easy way to do it, so that you essentially just ramp up.
It's like marathon training, Nico.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same deal, where you're going to say, all right, we're going to spend a little extra time on 3-woods. A Thriver for that course would be amazing. Being able to turn it. Love. I think you sold 51. I'm freaking getting one after this. Come on. Come on.
I know a guy, Nico.
I think we know a guy. So being able to manage that, and then essentially understanding, like, where's that player at on tour? Are they world number one who can focus on the majors? Because this is going to be a shocker to people at home. The week-to-weeks are important, but the majors matter most when you're at that level. Now, if you're number 125 and you need to get inside that top 75, all of a sudden the off week, the opposite field event, that is your major, because you need to perform. You don't have the ability to say, you know what, I'm 2 shots inside the cut line. I'm gonna work that draw right here. You can't do that, because you need to perform. Every day is the single most important event of your life when you're playing for your life every day. So it's understanding where that player's at, and then their own risk tolerance, right? Because like you said, they don't just hit 1-yard fades. I know it's going to be shocking out there to people at home, but they're not robots. People work the ball both ways. And what's the individual player's risk tolerance to say, you know what, I know in a couple months I'm going to have to hit this one. Let's work on that now. I've seen that shot. And every round is important, but to the best players in the world, you have a little bit more luxury in being able to play with a shot here, play with a shot there.
Nico, I want to ask about the everyday golfer and just the plan. You know, somebody's listening to this podcast, they want to sign up for Golf Blueprint. How far out are you structuring plans for people that are the everyday golfer, not the tour pro, that want to be a part of this? Is this like weeks in advance, months in advance? Like, how far out are you structuring their plans for their practice?
Yeah, so when they first sign up, they're able to just fill out a questionnaire and, again, kind of tell us what they want, right? What do you want out of this? Because at the end of the day, learner-empowered instruction is just, in my opinion, the way to go. If I was going to go get a guitar lesson, I want to learn how to play Metallica. I don't want to learn how to play, classic rock, whatever. I want to learn Metallica. And so we always say to people, like, tell us what you want. That's huge. And then give us the more information that you have. If you have access to a launch monitor, if you have access to stats, if you have a handicap, tell us what you're good at. Tell us what you struggle at. And then that first month, we'll give them essentially our best guess. We always like to say that. By the end of month 3, we're typically pretty good and dialed in, but that's where we can really start to dial that up a more and say, okay, hey, look, you want a little more short game? Fine. We'll tweak that algorithm to give you that. But also we have to understand that human beings are poor self-assessors. And at the end of the day, our job is to hold the reins of that and say, look, we know you, all of a sudden you figured out your driver, but we're not going to stop hitting drivers now and just go all to work on putters, because we do that as human beings, right? We overemphasize one area of the game, and then all of a sudden we forget about how to hit a 7-iron, and now we need to hit a 7-iron on a par 3. So it's that kind of push-pull that we work really hard on the amateur side with, to work with them, more importantly, on their goals, outcome and process.
Nico, if you could give advice to a 15-year-old golfer, just maybe he's just given up a couple of his other sports, basketball, baseball, and wants to go all in on golf, what tips would you give like a youngster out there?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm gonna take this from a speed perspective with you guys and stacks. I have tons of tour guys that stack. Get fast, number one, because when we're evaluating players, basically speed is a yes or no. Do you have X amount of ball speed or do you not? Now, there's some dudes that play at 155, 160 on tour. They are anomalies. If you have 180 mile an hour ball speed, life is just easier. It's just easier to play on tour. Now, there's also a bell curve on the other end, something we can talk about. But for that kid, I would say remaining athletic is so freaking important. If you can play other sports, great. All the parents want to specialize their kids at 9, 10, 11 years old. It freaks me out personally. I think you lose a lot of athleticism, and I think you gain a lot in playing other sports. Now, if you're going to go be world number 1 at 17, hey, man, I understand that. But if you're going to play college golf, be clear about your own goals. Hey, my goal is to play Division I college golf. Great. There's also Division II, there's Division III, there's NAIA, there's JUCO. Playing Division I isn't the end-all, be-all. If you don't go to the number 1 school in the country, that's okay. Golf, you can make it in a million different ways. To me, I would advise them to fall in love with the game and, more importantly, fall in love with the process. Because being good at 16 is cool. You make a lot more money at 26. Now with NIL, hey, man, I don't know. There's a bunch of
Might change a little bit.
Listen, there's a bunch of 19-year-olds that drive Lambos. So maybe I'm an old boomer. But my advice is, hey, listen, you're going to win a lot of majors at 26. Try to develop and learn skills. Take risks. It's okay to hit the ball both ways. It's okay to swing as hard as you can and miss with a driver. It's okay to try that crazy flop shot when you're 15. I want to see someone who can develop, because by the time you get to me, I don't work with kids. I work with the best players in the world. By the time you get to me, those days are over. Now it's your job. Now it's a grind, and you're coming to me trying to have fun. Enjoy it with your buddies. Spend the extra hour. You don't have any responsibilities. You don't have any bills. Mom and dad are paying for your entry fee. Life is pretty good at that age.
I think your point is such a great one, Nico, about, you might have goals. If you don't check that box, don't give up. Maybe now you got to just adjust. Maybe you got to adjust what you're going to do here and there. And there are different paths to this, right? And I think that's what makes every sport cool. When those NFL offenses list off the colleges to start the game, it's not all Bama, LSU, and Texas, right?
Yeah.
You got North Dakota State. You got these random colleges that'll pop in, from time to time. And it's just a reminder that you can get there down a different road. You might just have to work a little bit harder down that road.
Totally. Yeah, there's a million opportunities in golf. There's an interesting question that I've heard I've heard Claude Harmon say to mini tour guys a lot. And he'll ask them, he'll say, why aren't you playing on the tour? And they'll give a million different reasons. And I need to do this. And he goes, no, you're not playing on tour because you're not good enough. We have Monday qualifiers and you can show up and play. This isn't like the MLB or NFL draft where you have to play at a certain school, get drafted, go to the combine. Yep. There's nothing holding you back from going and shooting 61 and playing in the big leagues that week. Think about it. I can't go to a baseball game, have a sick home run derby batting practice, and, bat fourth behind Giancarlo Stanton. Like, it doesn't work that way. But in golf, we still have the most amazing democratic process of a Monday qualifier. If you can afford the couple $100, which, by the way, I think is way too high, but that's neither here nor there, and you could show up and play, you get to play on tour. That is the most amazing thing in the world to me. And I think it freaks me out that kids have if I don't do this, then I'm done. No, man, you always have the opportunity to play professional golf. There's nothing stopping you. It's objective. If you can shoot the score, you get to play.
I think it's a line from Tin Cup, Marty. I mean, it's I'm going to go out and try to get into the U.S. Open, right? I mean, if my score is better than you, and it's golf can be so intimidating, but at the end of the day, it is so silly that it is that simple, right, Marty? It's like, if I shoot 67 and you shoot 68, I beat you. It doesn't matter who you are. Now, you're better than me, so you're going to shoot better than me almost every time. But I put in the time and the work, and I find a plan, and I find the right equipment and stuff that fits me, and I literally invest in what I want to become. There might be an opportunity there for me to become that one day.
Yep. I love Nico. Fall in love with the process, man. I just it reminds me of Victor. He's at his ups and downs and highs and lows, but you can see how much he just loves the process. And so
loves the heavy metal too. Nico was saying, try to get that heartbeat going. You got to get the beats going in the headphone, dude.
So a funny thing for me is I figured out very quickly I actually like metal, so it had a reverse effect. And then I started listening to jazz, which just was the worst for me. Jams my heart rate. I get all cranky, start hitting chunk wedges and thinning 3-woods. I'm a mess out there with jazz.
Everybody's calming down with jazz, and you're just like, you're in. You're like, I am done. Nico, let people know where they can check out, what you guys are doing, how they can get involved, plans they can look at. What's kind of the process for somebody listening to the podcast?
So easiest way to find us is social @golf__blueprint. I am responding to all the messages for better or worse. You're going to get me. If you send us an email, you're going to get the Professor Kev. Golfblueprint.com. And please reach out to us. I always say to people, I live in Jupiter. I travel a lot. If you see me on the range, come up and talk to me. Come say hi. And if you see someone who's better than you at the range, they're probably stoked to talk to you as well. So I always try to tell that to people, like, please reach out to me. However I can help you, whatever we can do to make golf more fun. Because at the end of the day, like we talked about, if you're having more fun, you'll practice more. If you practice more, you're probably going to play a little better.
I think the point on asking people questions is, it's an intimidating thing even as an adult, but kind of going back to the gym analogy, you can go up to the biggest, most jacked guy on the planet if he's at the gym. And if you're asking that guy what they're doing, I've done it plenty of times in my life. They will give you an honest answer. They're not going to look at you like you're an idiot. They're there actually to help you because you're interested in what they're doing, because you obviously are seeing whatever gains they're getting out of that. And the same thing can be said at the golf course. You go up to somebody that's working on something or hitting the ball great or, is really good. Like, I mean, Marty, there's these stories of Vijay Singh helping out these young players that are up and coming, trying to make it on the tour. And the stories are excellent, but it's also part of what makes golf so great is it does feel like people are willing to help out. I mean, remember Steve Stricker giving tips to Tiger about the putting? You think about Rory this year telling Scotty to go to the mallet. Like, even the best in the world will help out the other best in the world. It might not work out great for everybody else if they start winning everything, but it seems like people are open and willing to talk. So I love that, Nico, and I love what you guys are doing. It's super cool. Thank you so much for your time on the pod. I hope people check out Golf Blueprint. I hope people get something out of this. So thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you for having me.
This is the Ping Proving Grounds podcast.